When I finally got my hands on an Analogue Pocket earlier this year, it immediately felt special. A great looking IPS display, a solid build, USB-C charging, compatibility with physical games and link cables, it's essentially replaced my need for all of my older Nintendo handhelds outside of pure collector reasons and a few niche use cases. Without any additional updates, it even outclasses the current jack-of-all-trades Steam Deck in sheer portability and crisp visuals. Analogue really hit it out of the park on their first try, so it might be surprising to hear that the Pocket's pulled even further ahead over the past few months. After several key updates, Analogue's basically redefined what the Pocket is about and who might actually find one of these useful. For most retro emulation, this is turning into the device to get, if not for some serious lingering issues. But let's take a look. For those who missed our initial review, or haven't been paying attention to emulation news in general, the Analogue Pocket is the answer to the question, what would a Game Boy Color look like if it were built today? It has the same iconic form factor as old Game Boys, and a cartridge slot to play physical cartridges. Plus, it has some key additions for the sake of comfort and overall compatibility, like shoulder buttons for GBA games, X and Y buttons for supported consoles, and a USB-C port for both a rechargeable battery with a decent lifespan and a connection to Analogue's custom dock for video out. I haven't thrown away my old consoles or anything, but it's been much less of a hassle to pick up random cartridges and not have to hunt down batteries or special chargers. With the GB Studio integration, there's even been some really fun moments with indie games I never would have otherwise taken the time to play. The only major complaint I've had about the hardware is that the cartridge slot is a bit shallow and doesn't quite allow for larger special cartridges, like an e-reader, to fit. I've kind of gotten used to it though, and worked around the awkward fit with an expander I bought from someone off the Analogue Pocket subreddit. So far, so great. But that's really just the vanilla Pocket, straight out of the box. With recent updates, Analogue's taken that initial scope of the Pocket as a wonderful niche device for anyone with a large physical games collection and expanded it exponentially, to a point where anyone looking for a dedicated retro handheld might really consider it, even if they haven't owned a physical cartridge since the 1990s. That huge expansion comes from what Analogue's calling Open FPGA, which is a software-hardware system that, from a very simplified standpoint, utilizes an additional FPGA chip already present on the Pocket to allow developers to create new sets of instructions, known as cores, to tell the Pocket how to play games from a variety of systems. In other words, while the standalone Analogue Pocket is essentially a fancy Game Boy Advance with some additional features, the potential of an open FPGA means that it can also be a PC Engine, Sega Genesis, or Super Nintendo, with just some extra effort from the community. That's important here because the Pocket's use of an FPGA means that it's not just using a piece of software to emulate or translate games' code with varying results. Instead, it's literally being configured to be that system. Through this hardware emulation, gameplay becomes incredibly accurate to the point where there's very little difference between playing through the FPGA and playing on original hardware. In fact, the largest difference is really just that these open FPGA-enabled systems don't come with native physical game support out of the Pocket. Not that that couldn't technically be added in through an adapter through the cartridge slot, like the ones Analogue sells through their store for ridiculous amounts of money, but anyway. Rather, ROMs of games need to be loaded onto the Pocket's microSD card to actually play games through these systems. That, plus installing the different cores, is about as easy as copying a few files to predefined folders. It's all incredibly easy and familiar as someone who's set up more than a few emulation devices this past year, and we aren't actually going to get into the specific setup steps in this video, but there is a great tutorial by WolfDen posted not too long ago that gives a great overview if you're looking for some guidance. I'll leave a link to that video down in the description. Definitely check it out. I will say though, don't use macOS for your setup. While adding the files for the different cores to my SD card, my MacBook created a bunch of hidden files, resulting in a ton of headaches while I tried to figure out what the heck was going on. I ultimately fixed the issue by plugging an SD card reader into my phone and managing files that way. But something running Windows or Linux might be preferable for anyone setting it up for the first time. Okay, enough technical details. How do all these systems actually play? Well, flawlessly. Well, at least the handful I've tried anyway. Most of the available cores are for arcade games that aren't of much use to me, or probably most of you out there. Likewise, while I enjoy the option, I'm not too familiar with, more unique consoles like PC Engine, so I also haven't tried them. The cores I've personally found most useful are SNES, Genesis, GBA, and Game Boy Color. So that's mainly what I'm focusing on for this video. Now, as someone who mainly intended to use his Pocket with physical cartridges, the SNES core was what really sold me on this whole open FPGA system. As old as the console is, there's something really cool about basically carrying it around in my pocket. Every once in a while, I find myself booting up Super Mario World on the SNES core for short play sessions to see if I can get to the next save point, and it just never gets old. There's no noticeable input lag either, and the controls feel fairly solid. The same IPS display that I loved for Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance cartridges also feels great here. That's remained true for the various different games I've tried across the core. Everything works well, and I've yet to see the Pocket really struggle. That doesn't mean I'll be tossing my Super NT anytime soon though. One glaring weakness is the non-existence of native system ports. That's a no-brainer considering this is basically a Game Boy, but it means that SNES peripherals don't really work. Games like Mario Paint or Mario & Wario that require the SNES mouse aren't going to work very well without some sort of adapter. Key quality of life features like screen filters and save states are also currently unavailable. That's essentially the downside of playing on near native hardware though. But, that could be a deal breaker for many folks used to playing these older systems on emulators where those features are pretty much standard by now. And all of this carries on to other cores too, not just, NES and SNES. Essentially, if the game couldn't typically be run on the Analogue Pocket, the extra software features, like save states, just aren't available. Again, not really a knock against Analogue here. These cores are currently just ports of those used on the MiSTer system, another more feature-rich FPGA platform. The compatibility of cores between the two platforms has been great for quickly getting a ton of cores up and running on the Pocket. Unfortunately, that also means that there hasn't been a ton of custom work done yet to enable additional experiences through these cores specifically. And given the fact that Analogue is publicly against associating their brand with the word emulation, I wouldn't necessarily expect them to go out of their way to implement a fix on their own. Plus, another thing to consider are actually, the physical buttons the Pocket has. Trying to play a game made with the Genesis's 8-way D-pad in mind might feel a bit awkward on the Pocket. Less complex games like Sonic 3 feel fine overall to play, but fighting games might not feel as good as you remember. The Pocket is decidedly built with Nintendo games in mind. Even if it can play non-Nintendo games, there's bound to be a varying degree of friction depending on how well the controls and control layout match with the console. But anyway, jumping back to the types of games officially supported by the Pocket, like Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games. Those games feel about as good as playing off of a cartridge, and even show the Game Boy startup screen since the original BIOS for each of those consoles is needed for the Game Boy cores. Unfortunately, they're not treated exactly the same as the physical cartridges. Save states now work without any hassle, but screen filters still appear inactive. That's fine for folks like me who really like the look of games on the IPS display, but others who want an experience more like playing on original consoles might be less satisfied and still want to go the route of something like the Easy Flash Omega, which is an actual cartridge, recognized as a cartridge, and still plays all the ROMs you can fit on a micro SD card. Also, as a reminder, the Analogue Pocket does not have any built-in rumble motors. If you were hoping to play rumble-enabled games like Pokemon Pinball or Drill Dozer, you're still going to need either a flash cart with a rumble motor in it or the original cartridge. I have seen the DS Rumble Pack, in possibly its first real use case ever, be mentioned in various threads as a way to get rumble features through the various Game Boy cores. And unfortunately, I don't have one of those on hand to test out, so I can't guarantee how well that works, but it might be worth a shot for anyone looking to add some vibration to their games. Still, if you can live with those caveats, Game Boy games play as effortlessly as ever and feel about as good as always. In fact, certain games might actually be better played on the Pocket through a core. Like my copy of Pokemon Silver, whose battery died a while ago. I probably will never get around to actually replacing the battery, and having a way to play the game in approximately the original form factor is a very nice experience. And I can even plug the original cartridge into the back if I really want to sell the aesthetic. But yeah, outside some niche problems for various consoles, the Pocket is now basically a super competent emulation device. Even without a physical games collection, players can now get really great gameplay with an admittedly nice minimalistic UI. Heck, if you do have a physical games collection, the recent updates have even provided nifty features like showing the name, publisher, and year of the cartridge you're about to play. It's a small touch, but just kind of elevates the Pocket to something immediately both nostalgic and modern. But, and this is a huge but, none of that really matters if you can't get an Analogue Pocket, right? If you could buy one right now from Analogue for its about $200 asking price, I'd say that it's a bit pricey, but potentially worth it for basically anyone who wants a really solid gaming experience for consoles predating the N64. But you can't. You can pre-order a Pocket and hope to get it within a year, but you have to be really dedicated at that point. And let's face it, if the Pocket already fit all your needs, you'd either have gotten one already, pre-ordered one, or have been waiting and watching scalpers on eBay. And don't really need me telling you that these consoles are prohibitively expensive for what they offer if you aren't lucky enough to buy one directly from Analogue. As much as I'd love to say this problem will be even resolved soon, as chip shortages have decreased a bit and supply chains are recovering from peak pandemic problems, that'd be really hard to say. Analogue, for all of its products, not just the Pocket, has been pretty slow to restock, deliver, and update, even with their ridiculously high demand. Them being a small company does afford them some leeway in my book, but it's worth noting that Pockets are very hard to get at a reasonable price right now, and it's too soon, even over a year after launch, to tell if that will even change. There's also the matter that all of the cores currently available to use with the Open FPGA system are provided and updated by the community, who's done a fantastic job so far. It's just kinda a double-edged sword. All this development for emulation is great for usage of the device, but Analogue's public stance is against emulation, intending for the console to only be used for playing physical cartridges or newly developed downloaded games. If Analogue went really hardcore into proving their public stance, that could mean that future updates break features in the community's cores, or prevent some cores from loading outright. Even if they, as a company, approve of all the emulation available on the Pocket, the reality is that copyright is tricky and could force their hands to do something like remove functionalities if a publisher, like Nintendo, didn't appreciate that users could now load ROMs straight off an SD card. Even if there are general workarounds like GB Studio patches or flash cards available, the Pocket fundamentally differs from most of the Android or Linux-based retro handhelds on the market, in that it really does depend on support from Analogue to be more useful to anyone not looking to use it solely for playing physical cartridges. Still, in a magical world where supply equals demand and Analogue is never forced to work against the community that's propelling their handheld to new heights, this might be the best retro handheld you could buy. Even with all the minor caveats or lack of filters for games played through cores, the Analogue Pocket remains my favorite way to play older games. If you're in the market for a handheld like this and can find one without supporting scalpers, I'd highly recommend you check it out. But, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Do you own a Pocket and have thoughts about your experience? Are you looking to buy one when supply ramps up? Or are you one of those weird people who can't fathom why someone like me would want to buy something like the Pocket just to play older games, which could even be emulated on something like my Xperia Play over a decade ago? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, if you found this video interesting or informative, click that like button to let me know. Then make sure you're subscribed for more mobile tech videos in the future. We've got a ton of projects in the pipeline, including one that actually lets me spend some quality time with my favorite handheld of all time. But that's all for this video. Until next time, catch you later.